Okay, everybody, welcome to the American Library in Paris, to Evenings with an Author, sponsored by Grow at Annenberg. I'm Rachel Donadio. I'm the Curator of Cultural Programs here at the library, and it is really a great honor this evening to have Maylis de Kerangal, one of the most wonderful writers working in French today, and Donatien Gros, who is the head of contemporary programs at the Louvre Museum. He's had just not much happening at the Louvre this week, so we thank him so much for making the time to be here. We're delighted to host this conversation to discuss Maylis's latest books that have been translated into English, Canoes and Eastbound, although I think the conversation may also flow over some of her other books. The two will be in conversation for about 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions from you in the audience and those of you in the Zoom audience. Maylis de Kerangal is the author of numerous novels, collections of short stories, novellas and narratives published with Vertical, including Naissance d'un pont, or so Birth of a Bridge, which won the Prix Médicis in 2010, Tangente vers l'Est, or Eastbound, Réparer les vivants, which is called The Heart in the United States, and Mend the Living in the UK, Un monde portée de main, which is Painting Time in English, and Canoës, 2021. Her books have been translated into 36 languages. And Donatien Gros is a longtime friend and conversation partner of Maylis, and in his previous position as head of contemporary programs at the Musée d'Orsay, he collaborated with her on her 2019 to 2020 residence, as well as on the 2021 exhibition of her work with Jean-Philippe Delhomme, Légende des Réserves. Please join me in giving them a very warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and delighted to be here, and always delighted to be in conversation with Maylis. We even, I've always, for a long time now, been a devotee of Maylis, and now that we're filmed, I can say it and with you in public once again. And even one of my greatest prides is that Maylis is a frequent guest and star of this quite famous bookstore in New York, 192 Books. And I, a couple months ago, did a reading of a book I wrote there. And when I said this to Maylis, I said, "Oh, you're going there too." And I love the fact that I was sort of following your footsteps. We'll be talking about, really my job will be to prompt thoughts from Maylis. If you've never heard Maylis speak, Maylis is of course an extraordinary writer, but Maylis is also somebody who thinks about things in very profound, very sensitive and very open ways, in a way that is really, really unique sort of space between a writer, a thinker, a fiction maker, and all that together in this person right here. So, but maybe we'll start with Canoes, and I want to ask you, when you thought about it, I think you thought a lot in terms of the voices. And I think the notion of the voice, the notion of who's speaking, and how this voice has tremulations, as intensities, is something that is very important in your work, and I'd be very excited, I'm sure we all would be very excited to hear you talk about it a little.
Thank you very much, Donatien. I'm very happy to be here, and I thank you for welcome this evening dedicated to literature. Canoes is a collection of stories, of text, interconnected. I've written them during the lockdown. They are not texts that they were apart, and I've bind them together. I've written them one after another in order all speak to each one speak to the others. I was trying to connect them, and one of a way of connecting these stories was to choose the motif of voice. What is the human voice? And all the stories are written by female narrative voice. So you have like a tribe, 8 texts, so like a tribe of women who are speaking. I decided, I consider voice first not as an abstract thing connected to I mean, poetry, things like that, but as a very concrete and material thing, an organ, a muscle, two thin cords in our throat, yes. And it was very important for me to first understand what was the Odyssey, the creation of the human voice, because we were not. It was not sure that the sapiens could speak. The articulated voices is perhaps the most sophisticated way of speaking, and only human as animals, but can do it. And they are not so far from primates. I mean, our birds, but in fact we are the only ones to have this kind of speaking by moving our mandible, and all that mandible, which is the only bone articulated of our face. All that kind of things were very interesting for me. So I met the voices by its physical, organical, I mean, nature. I was only interested by that. But for me, it was also very vibrating, because during the lockdown, we were separated from our friends, family, beloved. Their bodies were far from us, and I thought that the spaces were filled with voices by telephone. And when I think about that period, I think I've spent many hours speaking on phone. How are you? And for me, it was a time of voices, where the voices came and in fact have taken the power, I mean, in our lives. And in another way, we were wearing masks, and something was happening here. I mean, just in front of our mouth. I mean, so all these signs led me to write about voices. I mean, the interest for the evolution of Homo sapiens. Because I'm very passionate by the prehistoric times, and I was just finishing a previous book which was ending in Lascaux, and also the confinement. I mean, the lockdown because of the coronavirus, and I started to write about voices in that way, and I've chosen to write these stories because I wanted to capture what is the meaning of voices, what is the singularity of the voices, why the voices is such unique for me. And here begins the literature, because it's also a very important thing in literature and poetry. I mean, the voices of poets, etc. And for me, I realized during this work that our identity was completely connected to our voice. You can perhaps recognize someone only, I mean, with closing your eyes, only by hearing his or her voice. And for me, it was also connected to the death, because I was also thinking of the voice of the dead people, the dead I loved, and I was also very interested of the capture. What is to capture a voice by register it? So this was the material which with whom I began to write, in fact. Organic, muscle, very physical things. What is voice in terms of evolution, and what is our connection, our identity, which is in the voice, and also does the voice can connect the people who are alive and those who are dead. I mean, I've written a short story about that because entitled "Light Bird," and it's a father and his daughter. They are wondering if they are going to erase the voice of the mother who is dead 5 years before, and her voice is still on the register, messagerie téléphonique, the answer machine. So all that was very interesting for me. I mean, the voices became my material, and I spent many months thinking of that and writing about that. And why I've chosen to write short stories and not a novel, I cannot answer to that question, but I think I would like to modelize, I mean, the question of voices in different ways, and to give a text which could be as a novel, but in a separate piece, you know. As unique as a novel, a strong unicity inside the book, but which could spread its vibration in 8 texts.
That leads to many, many, many questions. But maybe I'm going to start from what you just said. You've described Canoës as a novel in novellas, a novel in short stories. I mean, normally when somebody is pragmatic, as I sometimes tend to be, either it's a collection of short stories or it's a novel, but a novel made of short stories. What do you exactly mean by that?
I would say it's another thing. It's neither one or the other, but I think it's a different architecture. The architecture of the book is as a constellation. I mean, there is a central planet entitled Mustang, which is a novella. I mean, quite more than half of the book in terms of length of the text. And around this text, 8 other satellites, and they are turning around and all around Mustang. And for me, it builds quite a constellation of text. And I was very. The architecture of the book was very important for me. It's like perhaps like we could say une installation, a display. And for me, it was the book is very. It's very important to see that it is like a display and not like, I mean, a collection of short stories. Perhaps a novel would be better for me because I think of there is many motifs, on peut dire comme en peinture, ouais, motifs in each stories. You can there is a little boy with a dark chocolate eyes. There is canoes. There are canoes. There are birds. I mean, these elements are the same. You meet this element in each stories, and I was trying to sew these stories together. For me, it was very important, and they are floating and they are vibrating around Mustang, which is an autobiographic novellas, where I come back on a period when I was in Colorado. I was living in United States at that time, and I spent 2 semesters in a little town named Golden near Denver, near the Rocky Mountains, and in this place I wrote my first book. There was un passage. For the first time, I started to write fiction. So, for me, this place, Golden, Colorado, is the place where I was born as a writer, perhaps, and I find my voice. I found my voice in that place, but I don't think it was so interesting to write I found my voice there. So I wrote the story of a woman who is learning to drive a car. So it's it was more interesting for me, and it's autobiographic. So I wrote my first novel, but I learned to drive a car, and had a very important accident there, where my life I changed its direction in United States, in Golden, Colorado. So this is the central planet, the central story of the book. And around that, there is 7 stories, which each try to capture a different aspect of what is a voice in terms of singularity. There is an enigma for me, and I would like to tell something about that enigma of the voice. For me, it was very interesting to think about it, because when you speak, when everyone is speaking, you cannot have access to your own voice when you are speaking. I mean, you have access to your voice only if she's sonorized by a microphone. Then you can hear your own voices, but if you don't have a microphone, you cannot hear your voices and your voice. And quite everyone listening to his voice for the first time said, "Oh, I'm talking like that. Oh, horrible!" And there is a separation between your voice and the sound of your voice. It is never you cannot hear your voice as the other are hearing it. So you are separate. Everyone is separated, and the fact that we cannot have access to something that is a part of our identity in terms of print, les empreintes digitales, fingerprint, no, like fingerprint or ADN, or it was something very enigmatic for me, you know. And there is here a scission, and I would like to explore that thing. You have not access to your own voice, and so you cannot know you as the other can know you. It was very interesting for me.
It's a little scary, because every time you speak, I have 10 questions, but and every time I'm just going to play this game of taking the last thing you say and drawing from there. You say you have no access to your own voice when you listen to it, but then of course voice is a literary voice. So Maylis, do you have access to your own voice, literary voice?
I think it is the only voice to whom I have an access. I mean, it's something very different, because it is a matter of what is reading and writing. I mean, in my work, reading and writing are like two communicating des vases. Je sais pas comment on dit des vases. Vases. They are in communication. So for me, it's the same thing. I mean, reading and writing, they are very strongly connected, and I have a long reflection on what is the presence of voice in, for example, reading. Because when you read a book, you hear a voice. Even if you read in silence, you hear something. It is not the voice of the author, because you don't know it most of the time. It is not the voice. It is not your voice. When I read a book in silence, in my intimacy, I don't hear my voice. So, but there is a third voice in a book, and for me, this is the most interesting thing. That each book has its own voice, and which is which is very very strange, and you can. It's a difficulty it's a problem to explore it. It's a question for me. What is this voice emerging from each book? My own literary voice, I can hear it when I'm reading my book at alta voce, loud voice. And for example, I've read by myself all my audiobooks, and because I wanted to hear my own voices reading my own book. And I'm trying to have access to my voice, and I think this is the heart of my work. I mean, trying to have access to my own voice, but it is not given. I mean, it's you have to. It's a conquest. I mean, it could be a goal, but it is not given. It's difficult.
You were talking about Mustang being an autobiographical novella. In many ways, your upcoming, the book that came after that, Jour de Ressac, which came to great acclaim, came out to great both public and critical acclaim a couple of months ago, is obviously not an autobiographical novel, but it goes back to the city where you grew up. And in many ways, there is a sort of I won't say psychological, but like interior landscape that is both basically the city is you, so to speak. So I'd be and asking you about autobiographical matter is of course a little absurd, because all your work is about exploring, the sensitivities of others that aren't you. But then as you are addressing it, how do you deal with it? And was, Mustang kind of a step in your evolution as a writer?
I mean, Canoes, yes, it was a step between, Painting Times and Jour de Ressac. Before Canoes, I've never I never wrote text saying I, in the first at the first person. It was always a third person narrator. So, and I was when I started to write using the first person, I felt I had not so much space. I was missing all my possibilities in terms of narrative fiction. When you write with third narrator, third person, you can someone can smoke a cigarette in New York and three lines above another person can swim in a river. I mean, you can do all you want. I mean, it's such a novel. It's such a plastic and flexible gender in terms of literature. Then you can do what you want using the third person. When you use the first person, I, it's you cannot do what you want. You are arrimé. You are hung to optic and psychologic frame. you cannot leave it when you want. You have an optic frame, un cadre, an optic frame, and also a psychological position. And this, I felt very strange and tense in using that for the first time, that first person. But I won also things I could not imagine at that time in terms of vocality. What is the vocality of a text? Presence, musicality perhaps, but and unicity of the text. I mean, for me, using the first person, it gives you that. And I tried to write for the first time in Canoes these little texts, these short stories using the first person. And then for the next novel, I keep on using that first person, because Canoes is like a passage, is like a book of transition also, and I was trying to make that step, and I was looking for more interiority, more vocality, and I was looking for perhaps books that were I would like to approach an autobiographic material, but as you noticed here, in Jour de Ressac, it is not an autobiographic book. It's really a novel, but there is a porosity, because using the first person and writing about the town where I have grown up, where I grew up. I mean, there was a shift. Very silent shift and irrepressible shift towards my autobiography, and I would like. The novel for me was a way of resisting of it, because I would like to stay in the space of the novel, because it's for me it is always the best place for me as a writer. That means the territory of the novel.
So that leads me to another question. I mean, you believe in the novel. You believe in the novel. It's almost like religious belief. And and I said this to you about Jour de Ressac, is that, in a way, it's I am part of the I could say writers who are more interested in porous forms, who sometimes thinks that novels are totally daté. And then something comes, and it is a perfect novel. And it carries on with all the history of the genre, and it pushes it somewhere else, which is what you did with Jour de Ressac. And in a way, the fact that you're describing Canoes as a novel, even though it is a collection of short stories, in a way, it speaks to your belief in that genre. And I would like to ask you, why do you believe in the novel so much?
I think that we need novel, and for me, I need novel to represent and to express myself, and to represent the world as I see it. I mean, for me, novel is like a tool to live. It's like a tool to see, and it's very strongly linked to the question of the knowledge. I cannot separate knowledge and fiction. For me, the fiction is perhaps the best way to access to some sorts of knowledge. For example, when I was a teenager, when I was 13 years old, my mother gave me a book of Émile Zola named Pot-Bouille, and it's a novel very strange. And when I think of it today, I think she was quite strange to give me that book. It was a rude and so brutal book. It is the story. It takes place in a building in Paris at the end of the 19th century, and what we call La Belle Époque. and you have this building and all the people who are living in that building, stage by stage. Non, c'est pas stage, c'est floor by floor.
Stage by stage.
No, floor by floor. And I mean, les bourgeois at the second floor and the servant domestic under the roofs. And I was completely fascinated by that book because it gave me an access to a world I couldn't have access to without reading a novel. You understand what I mean? I think in terms of to have access to something, emotions, feelings, perhaps you could. I even think I met love, I mean the feeling of love, before falling in love myself, only by experience a book. I mean, a reading of a book. I mean, for me, literature is there. It's always access to something, to feelings, but also emotions, physical realities, places, and for me, this the novel is quite also a magical object because it has not a defined truth. You read it at an age, and then 10 years after, and it's not a it's not a fossil thing. It's not there is not a sedimentation. It's always alive, and there is something which has no end. It's an endless source, endless fireplace. I mean, of un foyer, on peut dire un foyer au sens de au cœur de quelque chose. Pas la cheminée, justement.
The beating heart.
Well, the beating heart, and for me, novel is quite magic, and I need novel to see. For example, I think it's like the story of Spinoza, who was he was a lentil maker. You know Spinoza, and lens maker. Spinoza was a lens maker. It's a very fascinating story. He was a philosopher, but he could be a philosopher because he was a lens maker. He earns his life making lens, and if he makes lens, it's because we cannot see without the lens. And I think philosophy was also his lens in certain ways. So for me, novel is my own lens to see, to experience, to feel. I need, and it's very important for me that it could be also fiction, because it's even in the history of science. You can learn that the great scientists, they work with using fiction, using fictional dispositif to access to certain knowledge and to certain experience and to certain solution. So, and for me, it's very important. And also there is a question of desire, of my joy to write. This gesture can find its own space in the novel territory. For me, it's like a very endless domain where everything is possible, and I think everything is possible. But it's also a very fragile and vulnerable gender. Also, I mean, it is not because everything is possible that could do n'importe quoi.
So you're a romantic.
Quite romantic in yes, it's like a belief in yes, you're right, it's like a belief. I think today, if I want to, there is only one kind of text which are resisting to me. I mean, for example, I always prefer to read chronicle of trials chronics than a novel on trials. You know, I prefer read the chronicles themselves. Otherwise, I mean, for me, it's I think I can have a very thin knowledge of something by using the novel or fiction or non-fiction, but in novel.
Another thing I want to ask you about canoes is, for me, you've described. I mean, it's interesting you use the metaphor of science, because for me, canoes is a laboratory. You know, and in a ways, your books are often very I mean, not closed, but they're open, but they're structured, and they're a system in a way, a sensitive system. But Canoes, you said it was a transition novel text, but for me, it's even more a laboratory. And so, what did you want to experiment with? And can you tell us a little bit about that process?
First, I would like to experiment, as I said, the first person, and also work on certain format of text, because I did not use the short stories before. Novella was my natural format, perhaps, and novel, but the little ones I couldn't imagine to write a short story without others. You know, for me, it has. I would like to create a collective of story. I mean, a system of stories, and my ambition was to create reverberation, reflection, the echoes, and all kind of things, vibrations, all kind of things you can hear. I would like to experience, if it was possible, to create a unique vibration, but spread over 8 texts, and creating, reverberation was a huge process. How a text can, prolonger, go forward.
Build itself into,
to expand another one. How a text can expand another one, you know, or yes. It was rather that, but for me, when I wrote Canoes, the creation of that system was my first point as an artist, perhaps more than a simple writer.
That leads me to the next question. You know,
I want to add something. For example, no, excuse me. I just want to add something. The first novel starts. It's about a prehistoric mandible of the Mesolithic time, which was found in the south of Paris, near la Porte de Versailles, and it begins on a dentist chair. So this story. So we are in prehistoric time, and the last one of the book is about an old woman who have seen perhaps what we call the extraterrestrial engines, and so it was a way to covering, I mean, all the straits of time, you know, and all these stories together, they are also trying to combine different layers of time.
So the question I wanted to ask you, you said as an artist, and I think, Un monde à portée de main, Painting Time, tells a story of, a painter who's doing trompe-l'œil, and you've been in conversation with, with many artists, and you said it was interesting when you said it was more, you didn't do this book as a simple writer, as a mere writer, but almost as an artist, which is almost like a Proust quote. So in a way, how do you see but of course the specialization of your work, the way you put it into space, the way you make it into a display, is very connected to the visual arts. So can you tell us a little bit about how basically this novel is an installation and the previous one was maybe about painting, and how did that have an impact on your writing?
It's because I need to build. First I need a form. I am obsessed by form, and my first point is that narration cannot be only a story you tell you have to find a form and also a language to tell it. And this question of formal question, it leads me to see my work sometimes as perhaps as a builder, as an architect, or something like that. And I'm very interested of what is going to, for example, to process the book. In painting time could be a quite of classic Bildungsroman. In terms of un roman d'apprentissage, a young girl who is not very specific, finds who she is, learning to paint, but to reproduce the surfaces of the world. Marbles, woods, different kind of surface, and also vegetal and things like that. And you will see that all the book is the process of the book is going from workplace to another workplace. The first workplace is the school where she learns, but after you have a unique form, which is always a chamber, like a cavern. That could be Cinecittà, for example, because she's going to go to Cinecittà, the heroine, the major figure of the book, Paula, the main character of the book. She's going to Cinecittà after having learned how to paint, and to Moscow and that. But all the book is a succession of atelier, of workplace, where she stands up and she paints on walls. And from the beginning to the end of the book, you have this form, a place which is becoming fictional one, because you paint on the surfaces of the walls. And this gave me, the sensation of a process in terms of it is this unique form gives the sense of the book is architecture, but also is unicity. From Brussels to Moscow to Cinecittà, places in Italy, and even in the 10th district, arrondissement, in La Rue de Paradis, where she's living with her parents. It's a matter. All the book presents a succession of oui, des chambres, enfin des... Non, mais... ouais, rooms. Ouais, rooms with...
Chambers,
J'aime mieux chambers, mais non, mais chambers, c'est peut-être pas ça du tout, en fait. Bon, rooms with ceilings and walls to be painted, and until she is going to Lascaux, you know. This is the form of the book, and I need to see a form. Mm-hmm. I cannot work without thinking to the form of the book, and it's like a ritualization for me. It's very ritual. It's the way I process my own writing.
I'll ask you one last question, and we'll open it to anyone who has a question to Astar. So, you know, when you talk about architecture, of course, you know, one thinks of Balzac, one thinks of this great megalomania of the author as a grand architect, which is also Proust's megalomania, even though Proust changed from the inside. And I also think that, you know that famous quote from, you know, Hélène Cixous, who talks about écriture féminine as a writing of deappropriation and not appropriation, of losing yourself to actually open yourself to somebody else and opening that space to all those voices, which is what she does in her work. And for me, you know, I see your architecture almost as an architecture of deappropriation, if that makes sense at all.
Désappropriation. Il faut que tu m'expliques.
Well, so basically,
on dit appropriation, dépropriation.
C'est ça.
Et l'écriture féminine, elle est en dépropriation.
C'est ça. So you're like Balzac. You're a classical megalomaniac architect.
I think so.
Well, that's
no, but it's also because architecture have a great influence on my work, but for a simple way that that I grew up in the Perret building, Perret architecture in Le Havre, Niemeyer and Perret, and I mean it was a very homogenic architecture. The look of the city were so you were immersed in architecture when you grew up in Le Havre. You were immersed in architecture, and architecture became the first how it's building your own private intimate space. And for me, I think I have perhaps some traces of what is architecture of Perret in my own writing. I mean, my taste for what is material, what is physical, what is sensitive, what is very materialistic, but also I think there is the title of a book written by Elisabeth de Fontenay, which is Diderot ou le matérialisme enchanté. And for me, it was like le matérialisme enchanté. In Birth of a Bridge, the main character is named as Diderot. Diderot is the name of the first character, because I love this writer a lot. It's my favorite writer, I think, but also because there was this expression of matérialisme enchanté. I mean, you are connected both with the materiality of the world and also with something which is connected to poetry, sensuality, and I think Le Havre gave me that, but through the lines. Very simple, very through the concrete, in fact, and also through the very simple geometrical lines of the town.
I would almost ask you one last question, but I think you should ask questions, and if you don't feel like it, I have more.
Can I just ask one question, please? Can I speak loudly enough?
This is for the Zoom audience. They need to
Oh,
hear
I
your
see.
question as well.
Okay. The first book of yours that I ever read was Réparer, les vivants. And I just wondered what inspired you to write such an incredibly wonderful novel about a heart transplant.
Alors today, I mean, perhaps 10 years after, more than 10 years after, I can now perhaps approach why I've written that, because for a long time I did not really know why I've written this book, you know, because it was not something I experienced, I mean, heart transplant, in my families or some of my friends. But I think now it is very strongly connected to the death of my father, because I've written this book. I started to write it following the 3 months after his death. And I was trying to find a way of to make a metamorphose, I mean, metabolization of my pain in that book. I mean, it's always a process. It's again a process of metabolization. With that book, I think I have shifted my pen in this question, because I considered that that book as a song. I've what we call in French chanson de geste, la gesta. And so in the French literature, this kind of texts, they were medieval first. They build an action with many people. You have heroes, but you follow an action in an epic way. But it's a matter of action. It's high action, un haut fait, high fact made. T'as dit quoi?
High deeds.
Ah ouais, d'accord. And I would like to sing something also for my mother. You know, I would like to sing for him and for the one I loved, and I would like to sing something because I was thinking of that words, la chanson de geste, and you see, a transplantation, it's a sum, it's an addition of operations, gest, process. And my ambition was to give that impression of you can see people acting and processing some gest in a way that you could at the end come back toward the light and toward the life. So for me, it was very important to the meaning of singing, and for example, the meaning of voices again. And also, I've read at that time the text of a historian I like very much and who was very important for me, whose name is Jean-Pierre Vernant, and is a specialist of ancient Greek history. And I've read, when I was writing the book, I read, just before, I mean, when I was starting it, a book, text named La chanson de belle mort. I mean, what is the beautiful death? I don't know how. And it is the way that in ancient Greek, you give to a dead some rituals in order to throw his memory into the collective space, you know, and it is in the Iliad. It's what Priam asked for his son Hector. You know, he is going to the Greek camp to recover Hector's body in order to give him this what Vernant defined as the beautiful death, the song of the beautiful death, in order to, it's a kind of ritual. And I think it's the way I have done this one for my father, but also for my mother, I think also. I would like to sing something.
We have a couple questions here on Zoom that relate to setting and voice. The first one is, could you talk more about your relationship with English translator Jessica Moore? What was it like to work with a translator? And could you talk about that process? How do you relate to your work in translation? Thank you.
Jessica Moore, I met her when she started to translate Birth of a Bridge, which was my first novel translated in English, and we are now in 2010, and we are still together because she is translating Jour de Ressac actually, and so we don't have many contacts. She's living in Canada, in Montreal, I think. But what I like very much, it's she has the meaning of voices, and she is also a poet and a musician, and so she can capture, a rhythm and some musicality of the writing. But I have to say the most important thing that I think that the translator, in my opinion and in my way to consider the position of the translator, I don't think that the translator is translating a text. I think he writes a text. For me, the translator is a kind of writer. She is a writer, and as I have two translations in English for The Heart, Men the Living, two titles, I can see how the translation is a matter of subjectivity, interpretation, on music, on writings. The first pages, they are completely different, and I can use it when I do a workshop with students. It's a same text, two translations, and two different ones. And so now, we've done some events together when we have the opportunity to be together, but she's not living, so she's living far from France, but she came to Arles, because in Arles you have a center of translation, which is very important. And I came to see her. When she's in Paris, we try to see each other, but we are very separated. And at the end of his work, she's always she's translating, and at the end she asks me question, and we are discussing sometimes things that could be seen as very small details, but I like very much the way she's reading my work and the way she questions it. It's always details that mean a lot, and I can feel the intensity of her attention and the way she is completely immersed in the writing and trying to restitute something. Restitution, on the restitue, ça va? But I also think her personality, the woman she is used to give an inflection to the text, and it's okay for me, because I think translation that it's. I prefer seeing her as a writer. In fact, I think the text in English, she has written it. In fact, so it's. But we are close. We are close, far from each other, but close in the best way, I think.
One more question? I'm going to walk around here so I don't knock the camera down.
I'm very happy. I was very happy to hear your wonderful defense of the novel and how we need novels to express life. One thing that strikes me about your novels is they're highly curated. You said by writing you feel you're more real in the novel. By writing all those words, you have captured something about yourself. Sorry, can you hear? But it's very curated, very intellectual. How do you explain that voice?
I think it's because my work is not is supported by other works. I mean, you know, I've built quite a method to write, which is made by research, investigations, and also many readings to be the closer I can be on my motive, and this is giving writing very precise with many details, and also very full. In fact, it is full of thinking, full of thoughts. In fact, because I work a lot around it. You know, I'm completely immersed in my material. When I was writing on voices, the first thing I ask is what is the voice? In fact, in terms of science, what is it? In fact, so I need to understand how it appears, or how it appeared, and how it can change, or. And for me, all that work is filling my text, you know. And I don't. I used to say that my work is repose. Comment on dit repose? Lies on other books. Is connected to other books. Is making sign to other books. I'm writing because I am a reader, and I need to search and to investigate and to read in order to write. It is not. It's not. I don't believe very much in these words, which are genius, talent. For me, it's inspiration. I mean, for me, it's a much more horizontal way of writing, of working. There is no verticality, you see. So for me, it's my attention is completely over. It's spreading on many archives, sources. I mean, so it can give the impression of something very, very curated, and in fact it is, because the thing I like a lot is to rise words that have no, literary dignities. I mean, you know, words that are not very used in literature, but they are who are connected to a certain field of, for example, professions, the medical language, the language of painters, the language of the person who are building bridges. You know, all these languages are alive in my book, and because I try to give them a room, give them a place to rise them, in fact, because they are always hide, because they have no. I think that all the language that are connecting to the fact of working with your body, they have no dignity in literature, which is much more matters of thoughts and sentiment and feelings. But me, I am at the reverse of that, and I try to catch all that lexical by investigate, in fact, because when I start a book, I know nothing about it. But not the last one, because I knew this, because it was about a town where I lived. But bridges, hearts, paintings, I knew nothing about it before writing on it. I was very poor, and this is where the epic adventure of writing takes all its sense for me. You become familiar to something by writing on it. You know, it's very strange, in fact.